Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you.
And to our viewers, once again, just a quick introduction to how we got to where we are. We are addressing a response that Professor Akinyemi gave to a question. And that question was, what can we do for Nigeria to regain her place as a major foreign policy player? And there were three things that Professor Akinyemi referred to. The first one was about building a military institution and investing more in our military capability, which we looked at 2 weeks ago. And then last week, we started to broaden that out a little bit more. This week, we're going to be looking at the role of space. And that was the third thing that Professor Akinyemi mentioned, space as a tool for advancing a foreign policy. But as usual, before we do that, there is one major issue that is that's happened over the last few days, and that's the issue in Sudan. And sir, Sudan has exploded into what some are saying might be a civil war in the making. And one bit caught my attention, and that was the fact that an American diplomatic convoy was attacked. And the Secretary of State mentioned that there was a flag. It was clear that it was an American convoy and they were attacked. Thankfully, everyone is safe. Sir, number one, would like to hear your reaction to what's happening in Sudan. And number two, are the two factions being very reckless to be shooting at an American convoy, clearly marked as an American convoy?
Well, first of all, I mean, I really wouldn't, that wouldn't really be my focus in discussing Sudan. A country that has overthrown, assassinated, how many heads of state all over the world. I'm not going to really spend valuable time about whether the convoy flying the flag was attacked or not. That's not the important thing in this issue. Really, the important thing is we Africans are back in the news for all the wrong reasons. If we are not in the world news for starvation, we will be there for climate, lack of climate control. We'll be there for harvest problems. And now, of course, we are not there for the usual things, armies shooting at each other. I've said it on this program before, because this will not be the first time we will be discussing Sudan, that the civilians in Sudan have behaved like spoiled brats. Spoiled brats. I don't know how many times they have got close to getting what I will call maximum concessions from the military, only for half of them to then turn up on the streets demonstrating. I think the Sudanese civilians have been bitten by the virus of demonstrations from the French. I think they just love to demonstrate on the street. The civilians never seem to have one coherent and cohesive program. And this had then allowed them to miss opportunities for them to secure what they really aimed at when they overthrew President al-Bashir 2019 or thereabouts. I pointed out the mistake the Sudanese civilians were making at that time. And I will repeat it here because it's the same mistake that the Burmese have made when civilians, through concerted efforts, street demonstrations, managed to overthrow a military dictator. Invariably, they do so with the aid and assistance of a section of the military, if not the main military force itself. And yet, as soon as they have overthrown the military dictator, the civilians start to behave as if they did it all by their own, all by themselves. It was their power. It was their demonstration on the streets. It was all the flags they were carrying on the streets that led to this, and forgot that they needed the firepower of the military to get rid of a military dictator. And sooner or later, the military then bites back. That's what we have seen in Burma, and that's what we have seen in Sudan. Now, even if the civilians were united in their objectives, one could understand then that the military itself will be put under pressure. But the civilians are always divided into different groups. If you ever watch the demonstrations on the streets of Khartoum, different flags, they're carrying different flags. Professionals of medical association, professionals of legal this, professionals of secondary school teachers, all different groups. And you are then asking yourself, what exactly are your divisions? What are you dividing? I mean, I thought you want to get rid of the military and get into power. It looks like you are spending more of your energy fighting each other. And then, of course, the military then in the process gets strengthened. And of course, actually then happens, the military itself gets divided. And so we're back in the news for all the wrong reasons. Dead bodies on the streets, hospitals being attacked, doctors can't get to work, they're running out of water, they're running out of diesel to run, to run the generators in the strategic sectors of the economy. And lo and behold, ask yourself, where are the civilians who used to yell and scream at the top of their voice? They've disappeared from the streets. Nobody wants to die. They've disappeared from the streets. And I just laugh to myself as I sit down and I hear when they are now interviewing their representatives and their leaders, They seem to forget their own contribution to the mess that the Sudanese are, and of course to the bad image that it is giving Africa. Sudan, let's get certain things straight. Even the Secretary General of the United Nations is being naive when he says we are all for peace and they must drop their guns. And since this is the time for religious celebration, they should seize that opportunity to drop their guns and restore, and let's have a restoration of peace in the Sudan. The United Nations may be for peace. The two generals are not for peace. The two generals are fighting for power, for control. So the Secretary General of the United Nations is wrong there when he says, I think all of us are now reading from the same page. They are not all reading from the same page. Number two, Sudan is not alone. These two combatants are not alone by themselves. The main army of Sudan is backed by Egypt, by the United Arab Republic, while the Rapid Response Force, a grand name for a band of thugs, actually. They were the original Janjaweeds, thugs who were just recruited, put into the army by al-Bashir in order to help to fight in Darfur and committed so much atrocities there. They are backed by, in fact, they have become what I will call the Sudanese mercenaries. They are funded by Saudi Arabia because they have gone to help Saudi Arabia to fight in Yemen. They are also funded, surprisingly, by the European Union, who needed a force to help them police the Sahara Desert in order to prevent, illegal immigrants coming in from south of the Sahara, passing through to go to the Mediterranean. They needed the force to police that area. It's vast, and I mean, Sudan is a vast territory, and the European Union didn't care a hoot about the reputation of who they were funding. So they were funding them to help them. So that that's why they've become mercenaries in that area, funded by different groups for different objectives. And what this whole recent fighting is all about is the integration of the Rapid Response Force into the Sudanese regular army, how the integration would take place, who will head the United Armed Forces, and of course, like the Egyptian army, who will have control over the mineral resources of Sudan. It's not going to be the new civilian government. It's going to be the armed forces of Sudan. So whoever heads it, likely to become the most the richest person in Sudan. That is what this fighting is all about. So the American Secretary of State or the United Nations Secretary General, the African Union should not talk as if these people don't know what they are doing. They are not imbeciles. In fact, if you want to talk about the imbeciles in all of this, they are the people who are sitting in air-conditioned offices, in New York, in Washington, in London, and calling for peace and saying that they've secured. Let me tell you something. Whoever among these two is asking for peace is because he's losing the war. And whoever is winning the war is the one who is telling non-Sudanese to keep off and mind their business, that this matter will be resolved by the Sudanese themselves. The general commanding the Sudanese armed forces is saying, leave us alone, we'll sort out this matter. While the general commanding the Rapid Response Force is calling on the international community to come and intervene and help secure peace. So now you know who is having the upper hand in the struggle. But it's a shame. It's a shame. And I'm not going to say I feel sorry for the Sudanese civilians. No, I don't feel sorry, because one has been warning them for almost 3 years that they are playing with fire when they turn up on the streets, waving all kinds of flags, as if they're the ones in control. Whereas the people in control are the people in uniform.
Thank you for that, sir. Let us now go to the topic of the day. And I must confess, when you originally mentioned partnering with private space entrepreneurs as one of the key pillars of what a new foreign policy agenda should be for the new administration, I thought, oh my God, the prof is really getting very old now. And then all of a sudden, I got the research team to go and do some work. And I was shocked by what I saw. But sir, help us understand exactly what you meant by that point. And then I would open the floor up to some of the people that are on here to comment on it for or against. And would like a good debate, obviously in the context of Nigeria, because that's where we're looking at foreign policy and the new administration. So, sir, do you want to share your view again, and then our viewers can respond to that?
Yes, yes, thank you very much. When I myself suggested a space program as an adjunct of an activist foreign policy, I thought this is going to be the most radical of all the recommendations which I will be putting out there, and that I am going to be slammed down thoroughly by our colleagues on this platform. I myself was shocked when I then decided to seek for some data to defend myself. And I discovered that, in fact, what I was proposing was old-fashioned. That Nigeria actually has a national space research and development agency based in Abuja, that it has a program, I won't read all of it, that it has launched with the help of the Chinese, a few satellites out there, that it has in fact started training astronauts, although the details are not too clear, that in fact they themselves were suggesting that they will want to put a Nigerian astronaut in space by 2033. Now, what, and of course, there are names of Nigerians who have been, who are working with NASA, who could be tapped upon by a serious regime, by a serious administration. And then 3 days ago, somebody then sent to me, he is usually on our program, probably that's why he sent it to me, sent to me the name of a Nigerian who is not an astronaut by training. Actually, he's a choreographer. But you know, there is this Japanese billionaire who was going to pay Musk, whom I have mentioned as the possible person we ought to get in touch with. He was going to pay Musk to hire the strongest and the largest of his SpaceX rocket. And he's gone around the world picking people, I think it's about 10, who will go with him free of charge. I mean, he's going to pay for the Japanese chap. He's going to pay for everything. And a Nigerian is one of those that he has picked. Obviously, he was aiming for next year for the takeoff of this rocket that would then go circulate around the moon. It's not going to land on the moon. It's going to circulate around the moon and then come back. And one of the astronauts that he has picked is a Nigerian. Now, it turns out that the astronaut has the same name as myself. He's called Akinyemi. Now, I don't know how many queries I have got as to my relationship with this young man, and ranging from, is this your son or is this your grandson? And I first of all had to reassure my wife that I was never in that area when this young man, so his own Akinyemi is not my own Akinyemi. But you know, there is our elders, how they say, that whatever concerns one Akinyemi concerns all people called Akin. So I suppose we can't disown him. Anybody called Akin on this program cannot disown that boy. So I'm not the only one. But so really something that I thought was going to be a radical proposal on my part, in fact, turns out to be blasé. It's something that the Nigerians themselves, the Nigerian establishment has in mind. And all I can then say is hold their feet to fire to ensure that they don't go to sleep on the promises that they are making to us, to let them know, to let the incoming administration know that it is inheriting a program like this. I think their annual budget is laughable. I think it's about 10 million US dollars. That is a Nigerian senator steals more than that in a year. So we need to be serious about the investment that we are going to put into this. But the program is already there. So rather than fearing facing this group tonight, in fact, I'm so relaxed at facing them. And let us have a jolly good debate or conversation.
All right, so I'll open the floor now. If you want to comment on this, please raise your hand, and I'll get the team to unmute you so you can comment. But in the meantime, so you've talked about the budget, and would we say that the fact that we had to do some research to even find out about the program probably suggests that the government is not pushing that program enough? And that could be because they don't understand the impact of it. And I'll quote John Krieger here, one who wrote this article, NASA as an instrument of US foreign policy. And he says, we overlook the potential of NASA as an instrument of American foreign policy at our peril. And he really talked about the fact that NASA played such a significant role in driving American interests around the world. And so from a Nigerian point of view, and to our viewers here, from a Nigerian point of view, should we be doing more in this space? Should the government be doing more, or should we be focusing on other areas? But as Professor Akinyemi has said, his view is that definitely we should do more. So if you want to comment on this, please raise your hand, and we will bring you on so you can share your views on that point. Were you going to say something, sir?
May I say this, Mr. Moderator?
Yes,
may I say, we have such, when I say we, well, all right, we Nigerians, but let me be more focused. The press in Nigeria has such a negative attitude about running down Nigeria, as if there's nothing good to say about Nigeria. There was a program, and I won't mention the name of the platform, where an American diplomat had to take to the cleaners the 3 Nigerians who were interviewing him about why you running down your country. There's more to Nigeria than these things that you are pointing your attention to, and you are wrong in any case in a lot of what you are saying. But it's like there's this fondness about running down Nigeria. Yes, we have a lot to criticize about, but there was, just last year, there was sports meet, one in the United States, the other one in Glasgow, I believe, or Edinburgh. I'm not sure which one, where a Nigerian girl broke 3 world records and won gold medals. I took it upon myself to alert the editors that I know to bring this to their attention. Do you know that none of them put this on their front cover? Instead, they found some negative things to put on their front cover, until I then had to start lambasting each editor that, what's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? If your child gets a first class in an exam, would you be talking about maybe her younger brother who maybe, had to repeat a class? Is that what you will be saying about your family? There is this syndrome, and that is where I am going, that very few of the Nigerian press is covering the activities of this Nigerian Space Agency. But if there is problem, maybe a satellite crashed, that will be on the front page. Success, that will not make it to the front page. I mean, I just believe that we've gone into an episodic period of journalism in Nigeria, where it is the worst news that must be accentuated. And that's why a lot of people, including me, didn't know about it until I had to do research. Other countries will blow it up. Other African countries will blow it up. This is our achievement. This is what we are aiming to do, but not us.
One question someone asks about this while we're preparing was, when you look at NASA, I think it was 1958 or so, the original setup of NASA there, but NASA was set up post the war, and there was a race for dominance in space. And this is now many, many, many years on from then. Is there still such a major attraction for dominance in that space? Or would we say that we already have NASA there, there's an international space station there, we've not even done enough on the Earth that we have, we're going to tamper more with things in space? Could that be a reason why, from an African point of view, and maybe specifically Nigeria, is something that we don't really blow up because people don't understand the importance of such a program?
Then it is the responsibility of those of us on this program to educate our people. It is not for anything that, as you said, there's a space station up there, which incidentally its lifespan is about to expire. And both the Americans and the Russians who own it have said they will not renew their cooperation, but that each one will build its own separately. The Chinese are building their own separately. The Indians are building their own separately. There must be a reason why these people are doing this. Why should we be different? Again, why should we be known as the country that imports the highest number of champagne every year? That's what we will be noted for. The country that imports, the latest model of Rolls Royce. That what we will be noted for consumable wealth that adds nothing to the culture, that adds nothing to the civilization, and that adds nothing to the ranking when it comes to the respect that you earn internationally. All the things that we value, they don't add to our value internationally. Whereas other countries look at the same thing, they are not mad. I mean, are we the only one who is sane? Are we?
One concerns that people have had about this space program is the potential for space to be weaponized. Obviously, NASA came up right after the Cold War and all of that. And that once we get our heads around space, it gets more populated, then the risk of weaponizing comes into play. Are you concerned about that, sir?
Yes and no. Yes, I'm concerned that we, the human race, will export our negative attributes to space. We'll probably go and pollute the moon. We'll probably go and pollute Venus, Mercury, or any of these satellites that are up there. Yes, I'm worried about that. But at the same time, since it is going to happen in any case, I have held the point of view that the reason why we were colonized and enslaved was not because the Black culture was inferior to the white culture, but it was because they weaponized culture while we didn't. And so they used the superiority of their weaponry to overcome us, to colonize us, to enslave us. You know, it was the Chinese who discovered gunpowder. And the emperor of China decided that it was so barbaric, so uncivilized, that he banned it. Only for the Western countries to now take the same gunpowder, turn it into bullets, manufacture the guns, and use that to come and colonize China. And the Chinese swore they would never make that mistake again. They would rather invest also in weaponry than invest in bread, even though now they're in a position where they can make the investment in both. So to that extent, I wouldn't want again the Black race to be put in a position where we are the ones who will now hold the Bible or the Quran, while the other people, you know, either leave us in behind in a world they polluted, not us, and then go to the moon and go into space and leave us behind, and probably not be dumping their waste from space on our heads here on Earth.
If to our viewers, please feel free to ask questions. Again, just raise your hand. Once I see that, I will call you. So one thing that again struck me from the article that I was reading was this, and I'll quote John Krieger again here. It says, "Those who implemented NASA's mandate had a far broader vision of international cooperation than one that was simply subservient to America's national space needs." And that caught my attention, sir, because on the one hand, a space program could help, and we've seen from all the evidence so far that it's an important pillar in helping to drive national interests. But what this writer is saying here is that the vision was actually a lot broader than national interest. This was more about pushing science than it was national interest. And my question to you, sir, is that when you start to think about that piece around national interest, does that not somewhat dilute the value of going to space? Because if there wasn't a national interest that everybody was interested in, then maybe space is not the way to achieve that national interest. What would you say to someone who is saying, well, look at the science, not the national interest side of things?
No, I think I understand what the debate is all about. Scientists tend to be more altruistic in their own vision. Science for science sake. Science to see what benefit to human beings could come from scientific achievements. On the other hand, you have politicians. I remember I was in the United States at that time when John F. Kennedy, this about 3-4 months before he was assassinated, the Americans had not even succeeded in being able to launch a rocket into space. And I remember him addressing the commemoration, this is the graduation class of a university, and saying, I pledge my administration to taking men to the moon and bringing them back within this decade. And it was like, wow, we haven't even mastered the art of lifting the rocket from the earth. And here he is. And he, as I said, 3-4 months later, he was assassinated. But his dream was achieved by Lyndon Johnson, who took over. That pledge had been made. It was not just for scientific purposes. It was a dream of American exceptionalism. They were involved in a race with the Russians or with the Soviets at that time, and he was pledging that the United States will do this, will achieve this, and that's what should drive you scientists, and not just, and you know, it happened. And I was still in the US when the Americans landed on the moon and then came back. And, you know, I think every American grew 6 extra feet that day when that achievement was made. Not only that, probably a lot of people who were not even Americans felt Americans with that achievement. The human beings can achieve this. So let us key into that. Science will be driven by scientists, but scientists need money to run their programs. They are only going to get this money from the political elite whose vision is not the same as that of the scientists, but it's not antagonistic. At times it is, because the scientists who discovered and manufactured the atomic bomb, when they saw what the American president did to Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they said they regretted manufacturing that weapon. But of course, for the politicians, that's the headache of the scientists. They have used what they have to achieve their purpose. And they will claim that, in fact, it's because they have and they used the atomic weapons that we haven't had a third world war since the end of the Second World War.
I can see Dr. Dako Thomas has his hands raised. Dr. Sir, can you please go ahead, sir?
Thank you so much, Prof. I really feel that we are moving somewhere. We are moving ahead in terms of conceptualizing an agenda for the incoming administration. However, I want to say that we need to do what I will call either program or agenda prioritization, because this space program, I don't think it comes within the orbit of what I can call the short-term program or short-term agenda. There are, if we segment our agenda in short-term, long-term, we'll be able to know which of these agenda or which of these programs would definitely, would attract the immediate attention of the incoming administration in terms of our foreign policy agenda setting. As far as I'm concerned, this space program should come under the long-term agenda. It's of no immediate need now. I'm not saying that it should be abandoned or it should be jettisoned. I'm only saying that the resources we are going to pump into it as if it's of any immediate necessity would definitely attract some kind of uproar from the people whose immediate needs go beyond space program. And if we are saying we must raise the consciousness as an enlightened, as the elite group of the nation, we need to be able to justify our, why we are making it a priority, because the hunger in the land is terrible and it's very endemic. And I think that is what really needs attention. Yes, foreign policy can come pari passu, but first, we need to also know that some of our interests should first of all be how to, let me use the word in quote, conquer the African setting, the African setup. That is how we can become an Africa. Well, we said giant of Africa the other time. Yes, how we can reenact the giant of Africanness, that we used to be, rather than going to the global attention, rather than creating a kind of global attraction for ourselves when we are yet to be of any to make any significant inroad in Africa, because we still have a lot or some countries to contend with. And we still don't have the kind of respect that we used to have when Gowon was there. We need to reenact that. We need to go back to that until we have displayed and we have assured, or we are sure of ourselves in terms of our capabilities, in terms of our readiness to come back into global reckoning. I don't think we should venture into it. Yes, this like I said, it can come under long-term agenda. And if it's coming under long-term agenda, we need to do what government is going to do with the Ministry of Science and Tech first. That we need to put in order. We need to put that one in shape. Because as far as I'm concerned, I do not think that I have seen enough or sufficient display or expertise by our Ministry of Science and Tech in terms of discovery, in terms of space aggression, and in terms of space competition. So all these things we have to. So first thing is to segmentize, or is to make sure that we identify first what will come under short-term agenda, what should come under long-term agenda, so that we will not be misleading the government, the incoming administration. It's laudable, but I believe that prioritization is very, very key. Again, for now, those who set up NASA had a vision of what they actually wanted to achieve in terms of global hegemony. Do we have any agenda for global control or global superiority or global competition? Do we have the capability? Do we have the capability now, or maybe even the capacity to say we want to compete globally with some of these nations that have myriad of space programs? I'm not underestimating our capacity to achieve this kind of goal or this objective. I'm only saying that we need to tread softly and softly so that we will not we won't be putting Y before A. Let's come through A, B, C, and then we do a kind of agenda setting in the proper way. That's my contribution, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for that. Prof, sir, do you want to respond to that, sir?
Yes. Several answers I have to that. Number one, the following African countries have satellites in space: Uganda, Zimbabwe, of course, Kigali, Rwanda. I think there are about 5. I've mentioned 3. I can't think right off now of the other 2 have satellites in space. So it's not that Africa is being left alone while they are concentrating on agricultural development. I think these countries that I've mentioned just thought, well, they can do both together. That's number one. Number 2, Dr. Thomas said we should go back to the time of General Gawan, which, well, some will maintain General Gawan, or maybe General Murtala Mohammed were the heydays of our foreign policy. But policymakers will be lucky if events, the same events, reoccur for them to be able to exploit the same things. One of the messages which I used to, when I was at the Institute and as a minister, I tried to drive home to Nigerians is, are we not going to have a foreign policy after apartheid? There will be an end to apartheid. from the time we were independent up until the 80s, anti-apartheid was the driving force of our foreign policy. And that's why we continue to boast that we were even invited and accepted as a member of the frontline country. But after apartheid, are we not going to have a foreign policy? None of the things that happened under General Gawan or General Murtala Mohammed are going to repeat themselves. And that is why I came up with a few initiatives that after anti-apartheid, we can build upon to have a foreign policy. Now the world moved on and started having G7. Some foresaw the end of the Cold War and started the establishment of BRICS. I foresaw the coming up of BRICS, even though at that time I called the concert of medium powers. Then they had G7, which they came up with. So, you know, there are different constellations coming up as people seem to redefine their foreign policy objectives and what will drive that foreign policy as circumstances change. And we in Nigeria cannot be different. Dr. Thomas talked about the space program in terms of global competition. I don't see it that way, because if it were, South Africa will not be invited to be a member of the, is it the G7 or G8? Can't remember what they call it now. South Africa will not be invited to join. BRICS, South Africa will not be invited to join. Saudi Arabia, having now extricated itself from the apron strings of the United States, is now boldly making its presence felt, whether it is, resolving its problems with Iran, and you could see the evidence of that in terms of resolving the Yemen war. The role of China in even coming into the Mediterranean, where it hasn't been, and making successes of its intervention. What I perceive the achievement of these different medium power countries, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, India, is not that India is not seeking to compete with the United States. Obviously, it can't. But when you are going to redesign a new world order, and you've already considered the permanent seats to the permanent boys, then stage 2 or level 2, permanent seats to who else? It will then be to those who will be representing regional powers, not global powers, regional powers. And I thought Nigeria should be among the regional powers and not the global powers. The resources that we have, the issue we have with them is management of those resources. We are mismanaging our resources. And that's what gives the impression that we cannot have these initiatives while there is hunger in the land. But as I've said, I don't know whether it was last week or in several other places, I don't know any country that has finished resolving its domestic problems before going into an activist foreign policy. I'm not talking about the banana republics, which for the sake of diplomacy, I will not mention. But except to say that Nigeria is not a banana republic. Nigeria has so many alternatives in terms of its economy that it could draw upon, provided round pegs are put in round holes, provided leakages are reduced from 85% to maybe 10% or 15%, provided, I mean, we had this, I've forgotten the name you call it now, that, you know, if you catch somebody stealing, you can negotiate with him. Like everything else, we turned it upon its head, that when you then catch somebody who has stolen $100 million, you allow him to keep 90 million and you collect 10 million from him. Whereas in fact, the thinking behind that is you let him keep 10, he refunds 90 to you. But it's because, you know, you put the wrong people in charge of, you know, implementation of your policies. So I believe that Nigeria has got to pursue policies that allow it to be representative of the African region, the African continent. Please don't forget what Mandela said in that famous interview with Baba Ahmed. He said, until Nigeria puts its house in order, Africa, and he added that to it, and the black race will not pull itself up by its socks. Now, here was the president of, a former president of South Africa. He didn't call on his own country. He didn't say until South Africa puts up. He said until Nigeria puts its house in order, Africa and the black race will not be able to pull itself up in the world. And I think that is what is driving some of us in terms of what looks like, you know, wild measures, you know, that we make. And don't forget what I said when you said, oh, well, medium term, short term, long term, that already Nigeria has a space program, and that in fact, that space agency had set 2033 by the time it wants to put Nigeria in space. That is not my projection. That's the projection of the government agency. And it is just to fund that vision, which government didn't reject.
Thank you very much for that, sir. And as I did the research here as well, sir, I think overwhelmingly, a lot of political scholars and have been talking about the fact that space activities actually represent a major accelerant of development, if I can use that word there, for humankind. Because when we look at the number of things that are dependent on space, as simple as the navigation systems that we have in our vehicles these days, which some years back never existed, you know, some 20, 25 years back, I remember even in the UK, people were still using A to Z. I don't remember the last time I saw someone using an A to Z to try to go from point A to point B, right? And I cannot even remember the last time I had to go somewhere and I didn't just get the sat nav on, make sure live traffic was there, make sure all these things were there. And one of the things this particular person said here in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia, International Geopolitics and Space Regulation, the title did, was space activities have changed due to the growing participation of non-state actors. And that's what you were saying when you talked about using some of the private investors in that area. He went on to say, space activities are relevant for the well-being of humankind. Many services provided by public and private companies, such as satellite broadcasting, weather forecasts, satellite navigation, all have a strong socioeconomic impact. You know, I can imagine the difference that would make in a country like Nigeria if a lot of all these things suddenly made their way into Nigeria. You knew exactly where traffic was and where to avoid based on satellite information. So thank you so much, sir, for the conversation. Thank you, Dr. Dapò Thomas, for that conversation, your views that you shared there. I can see someone on YouTube saying Dr. Thomas's line of thought is relevant. However, we cannot return to being the giant of Africa with our focus only being on internal issues. The country must move beyond just internal focus to be recognized. So on that note, I would say thank you very much for everyone who has been here right from the beginning with us. We'll be back again same time next week. And I'm sure that we will bring up this kind of format more so we can have broader discussions on a lot of all this kind of topics. I know we still have one outstanding, sir, and maybe that's something for the next town hall style session. We talked about who is an African. That is still outstanding on who is an African. And just on this space issue, sir, it might be worth reaching out to the National Space Research Agency you talked about and see how they're going. Had I known that they were there, I would have tried to get them on the program today to talk about some of the challenges and what exactly it is that we can do on that. I may still do that, but I will let you know, sir, if that's going to be the case. But for now, who is an African was a topic that was outstanding, and that's going to be the next one. Definitely.
All right. Okay.
All right, sir. On that note, thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you for joining the program, and we shall be back next week.
Yeah.